Yo! My 96 Civic. I'm going to put a noisy fuel pump in my car. One more thing I'm going to do before I get all crazy with this. I want to put this in and drive it around and make sure it's going to be okay. I got a Walbro GSS 342, 255 liters per hour. It should be enough for what I'm doing. There's a lot of knockoffs around. You're going to want to, if you buy one of these, you want to make sure you get it from a reputable licensed Walbro dealer or Walbro. One way to tell the difference is there's metal in there, the impellers inside of here. If you got a cheap knockoff, they're going to be plastic. Some of them say Walbro on them and they're plastic knockoffs. So that's going to be right. I didn't get any extras with it either. I just got it all nice and plain Jane. No extra wires, no sock. I'm going to use a sock in the wires I got. I might rewire it, I don't know. And I got a Wix filter. First I bought a cheap one. The microns are the same amount as a Wix. And I saw paint inside of it. I went to the parts store and I made them break out another cheap one and then a Wix one. And I looked inside to see if I could see the difference. And there's definitely more filter material in here. It's a little different color, but it's probably the same substance. But this one should flow better because there's more material in it. So I spent more money and got a Wix. I got this wire. I got a bulk from Fleet Farm. I like using this as 10 gauge. It's stranded. You'll find this in the regular house wire section in big spools. And it's only like 23 cents a foot. So it's really cheap. It's cheaper than automotive 10 gauge wire. And the reason I really like this is because it's nylon. So the coating is like really tough. You can't wear through it as easy as the regular automotive type wire you find. In fact, I think automotive wire is cheaper. They just charge more money for it. Now, I don't think you can read this. I'm not going to bother trying to focus on it, but it says it's 10 gauge and it says it's gasoline and oil resistant. So generally, unlike most automotive wire, you can't just take regular automotive wire and put it in your tank if you're to rewire the fuel pump in the tank. Some people do it and they're stupid because the stuff just turns into jelly. But this stuff can handle it. So I could literally rewire my fuel pump with this stuff, and it'll work really good in the tank. And I got a relay. I don't ever buy the relays from the parts store that have the little hole drilled in them. A lot of times they're cheaper and they don't last as long. I get these out of cars all the time. Whenever I go to a U-Pull-It yard or something, I just pull some relays here and there. I got a whole bunch of them. This is a Hella, and they're usually really good. And another reason why I don't use the ones that got the little screw hole in them is because there's no diode in those relays. They're actually cheaper relays, and they're of very low quality. And if you can see in here, there's a diode in there. And you want that because they put diodes in almost all relays from the factory because they're safe for solid state devices. Now what happens is you got this coil, and this coil is energized, and it makes an electromagnet, and it pulls this in, so it makes contact, so your relays work. This is a normally open, normally closed switch, so you can use either or. They call it a double pole, double throw. They weren't numbered either, so I actually looked it up and I made sure I was right, and I got them numbered. But I'm going to use these 2 pins for my 10 gauge and these 2 pins for the switch. And the reason why I use a diode is because when this field de-energizes, this coil is no different than like a coil pack in your car. It's going to throw out a couple hundred volts, very low amps, but a couple hundred volts, and it makes a really nice shock. And it can backfeed into your electronics. And I'm actually going to use the power from my ASD main relay. The fuel pump wire comes out of the main relay, the ASD main relay, and I'm going to use that wire to feed this. Now I don't want, when this thing unloads, I don't want that power backfeeding into the relay, making sparks and crap going in there, because I could ruin the relay or whatever electronics that this could be hooked up to, that this wire can go through. Now the only thing you need to remember, if you want to use a diode and you want to hook it up the right way, is this little line right there, that little gray line. It's always facing one way, and that's where you want the power side. The power side that's going into this relay's got to go here, and the ground, I actually marked it. You put the ground on the other side, and that way it doesn't unload all that current back into your power source. Now, when you use them ones you buy at the parts store that have the little hole in it so you can mount it, I mean, it's really convenient, but yeah, those things can burn up your solid state devices. So these work really good. They're very heavy duty. I mean, they're made for cars, and they're put in factory cars, and they last a long time. So I just took a screwdriver, and you can take any relay apart by just taking a screwdriver and just pulling on each side until this comes out. And then I snap it back in. I pulled it out too just so I could look at it. I looked at the contacts to make sure they're not all burnt out, and they look super clean. It looked like it barely ever been used. I probably pulled this out of a really new car whenever I did it. So that's what I usually do. I find low mileage, really clean cars, and when I take relays out of them too, I make sure that it's a relay that's in a system that's not used a lot, like for the power windows or the sunroof, you know, something that's not used a lot. You take it out of like your cooling fan or your AC switch, and they cycle a lot and they turn on and off a lot, so they get used a lot. But like if I pulled this out of a moonroof or something, they barely ever get used. So that's that. Yeah, these things, they call for a 20 amp circuit. So they probably draw about 10 amps, because anytime you want to figure out what fuse you use, you figure out what kind of amperage it draws, and then you double it, and then you use a fuse that's twice as big. So they say use a 20 amp fuse max. So that means I could probably get away with using 14 gauge wire, but I'm going to go all the way from the power source at my battery and all the way back to the tank. So the longer you go, the bigger the wire you need. Okay, and that's it. I'm going to get right to it. Yeah, that's a nice solid connection. I might as well do my fuel filter first. Impact wrench is best. Put some filthy rags down under here. Yeah, I didn't want to use a K&N filter either. The micron filtration is not as good as a regular filter like this. A lot of K&Ns are like that. They always tout that they're higher flowing, and the reason why they're higher flowing most of the time is because they don't filter as good. It's better to get a bigger filter if you want it to flow better. Use the same material and you just get one that's twice as big. I've never been sold on K&N anything. Got a 10mm clamp on the back of this. This is a 14mm and a 19mm. Then my underhood fuse relay box. There's two 10mm here. One's coming from the battery, and then the other one's going out. There's an 80 amp fuse here, and I'm pretty sure that it runs in and out of this 80 amp fuse, and I don't want to be part of that fuse. I want direct battery because I'm going to fuse this system. So right where this battery terminal is, I put a nice sharp bend in this wire. Hopefully I can just squirrel it in here like this. There, that'll be a good solid power wire. This is pretty wild what I did here. I got to get this thing on the inside of the car. There's a bulkhead right here. You can use fish tape or coat hanger or any kind of stiff wire or whatever. I kind of wanted to keep it away from all them wires just because, so I just poked a hole in that rubber. I used a 3/16 brake line because I couldn't think of anything else. It's actually pretty slick though. Where is ya? Anyways, it's under the battery, that bulkhead connector. And yeah, I took the brake line and I fished it all the way out to here. And then I ran the wire back around and up, so it's going to get fed the right way. I stripped it out, used a crimper. I stuck the wires inside the 3/16 hose, and then I crimped it. So I'm going to pull it through now. I kind of dressed this up a little bit. I cut little notches right in here and here, so this wire sits a little better. And I cut this out too, so it sits in there nice. Next thing I'm going to want to do is get this glove box off. There's two 8mm for the hinges. And this glove box should just fall out like magic. Then there's a screwy little clippy Phillips looking thing here. Get that out. And then this cover can come off. There should be a screw up here, but it's missing. This panel should come out. Ugh. It's got 3 clips that hold this in. Surprising it even needs screws. And this one's got a couple in it too. The reason why I'm doing this is because this is the ASD main relay right here, this gray box. I gotta get at these wires because I need one of them. There's a 10mm screw on the back side of this. There should be a yellow-green wire. That should be my fuel pump wire. Take the tape off of here. Pull this loom back a little bit. I see 2 yellow-green wires. That's not fair. That's not fair at all. I got to figure out which one of those goes back to the fuel pump. Yeah, it's probably this wire right here, I'm thinking. Anyways, I'm going to unplug this just to make sure I got the right wire. Now there's supposed to be a 10 or a 12mm right here, down inside of here, and it's gone. It should just pull up. And then there's a tab in the middle. You got to push forward. You got to push forward and lift up. Then this thing comes out. All kinds of yucky junk and money. Little kid stuff. Somebody had a baby. And it wasn't me. I got jewelry. I win. Got a bunch of Phillips screws on here. 4 of them. I can peel this rubber back. There's a little tab right here you can push in and this pulls out. Pinch clamp for the return line. Then a quick connect on this. Little plastic tabs you push in and they click and this pops out. And I got a bunch of 10mm on here I got to take off. And the pump comes out. Just be kind of careful and wiggle your way out of here. I'm going to cap this hole off so it doesn't stink up my garage too much. Let the fun begin. This is only like 14 gauge wire. For how short of a run this wire is, it can probably handle a little over 20 amps. So technically it's fine for this pump. I should put bigger wire in it though. If you're going with a 450, you'd probably want bigger wire. The only thing is with this is you can't really buy a harness that works for this. You got to make one because there's no way to get through here without fabbing some stuff. Yeah, see that metal tab? I got to take that off to get this sock out of here. I want to reuse it so I don't want to wreck the thing. Here, I got it. There, now I can get this off. I'll be reusing this hose. I don't see anything wrong with it. This does say plus minus. And it does plug in. Just making sure. It's always a good idea to put this clamp on the same way it came off, which is right there. Oh, the little child-proof connector won't go in this pump. It's missing the thingamajiggers. Gee, wow, this thing sits a little different. Oh, the body's longer. I wonder why. Give that a good amount of wiggling, make sure it's on all the way. Put a little 6mm socket on here. Press that on. There. It's on there. Now for this connector, let me get the tape off of here. Oh, this thing's strange. Indeed. Wow. Funky. On all the positives, this one. I don't think I'm going to be able to use this connector. Yeah, I made this out of a 30 thousandths feeler gauge, and I beveled the edge. Try to focus on that, it's impossible. Next thing I gotta do is see if I got the right fuel pump wire on that ASD relay. So I got my continuity tester on beep. So, and I got the positive lead on the wire that I think it is on that connector, and then if I touch this it should beep. And it beeps. So I got the right wire. I know what I'm doing. Now that I got this connector apart, I can pull this thing out. I can actually put this connector back on here. Okay, I can just leave that flop in the breeze. Take the tape off of here. Alright, I took this connector apart and I made sure that the positive was right here. I got a new ground too, because your ground is just as important as the power. Current actually flows from ground to power. So having this little tiny ground wire on here is not a good idea. Next thing I'm going to do, I got some gasket sealant, ultra gray, and I'm just going to swab some in here, so if I ever got to take this off again, it'll just piss me off. This will help keep it in, it'll help waterproof it, it'll keep it from wiggling around. It does absolutely no good right now, but once it dries, it'll hold it in there real good. I'm going to put a zip tie on here, because once this dries, this zip tie will actually help keep it in there too, I hope. Glorious indeedy. I'm going to put this boot on here. I think this ground wire is going to go right here. It looks like a really good place for that. Now before I go any farther, I might as well power probe the thing. I hooked the ground up to the battery and left the positive on the battery disconnected just to make sure this is a good ground, which I can't see why it wouldn't be. I should be able to just induce power into this wire. Oh yeah, it's going. You don't want to run these pumps dry, so the only way I can test this is if I already put it in the tank. That's a loud pump. There's a 14mm on this seat. There's a little plug in here that I'm supposed to take off, but somebody already took the plug out and pulled this out of the way. And this panel should pop out. Okay. Looks like this panel's in my way. A little plastic screwy type thing that's way up in the corner here. There, pull it back. Straight back. Okay, so I got this wire running under this bolster or whatever you call it, and comes out right here, and it runs around down on the floor, and it comes right up by my computer right here, goes up this way and up through here, so it's going to be in the same place as my ASD relay. Okay, now for this fun. Here's the wire I want right here. This is my fuel pump wire. I'm going to cut it a little short because then if I ever got to connect this thing again, I can. This is a dead wire, so I don't need to tape it up or anything, obviously. It's like my ground's going right here. I got my switch power hooked up. Now I can plug in this relay. Now the 30 and 87, which are these two end ones, 87 and 30, it doesn't matter which way they go. That other one though, because there's a diode on it, it does matter. This goes on 86. The power, the supply power, the positive always goes on 86. Oh yeah, that wants to be there. I'm going to put a whole bunch of black tape around this. I'm going to put a little zip tie around all of these wires to try to keep them from moving around, so they all stay together. Good solid amount of wrap right there. That's in a good spot. I don't see that going anywhere. I can tug on that really hard. It's not moving. That's good. Well, everything works. There's just one problem. No fuse. I was thinking about putting it next to the relay or some other place. But now that I got all this put together, I realize that there's not really any good accessible place to have it except for right here. It's actually best to have the fuse as close to the battery source as possible too. I got a low amp current probe on this fuel pump wire, so I can see what kind of amperage this thing is actually running. Okay, that's good. I got the accessory on and the fuel pump fired up, and then it's shut off just like it's supposed to because it's hooked up to that ASD relay. So it's under 10 amps. That's great. That way I know my little wires in the fuel pump aren't too small, and 20 amp fuse is about right for this. And that's a job. Okay, bye.